So there's this super annoying thing about 2-pen-1 hand in that some tricks can only be done in some slots. So for example, this trick can only be done downwards, you cannot do it upwards. And I'll show you why. So how the trick works, the top pen is held in T1, the bottom pen is held in 1-2, and you can see how the top pen is dropped into this slot, and then we do a pass normal, and then the index finger moves out of the way, right? So it does this movement, lets the bottom pen pass, and then catches the top pen. Okay, so for doing this trick in the upwards direction, we would have to do the same, right? So we would have to put this pen here, and then we would do a pass normal, right? But now we are stuck because these two fingers can only bend in this direction. They are closed here, right? We cannot continue now. What would happen if we, instead of fingers, had 4 floating sausages and we could do basically whatever we wanted? So what happens now is that you can see that these 2 bottom fingers I can bend in the other direction, right? So what happens now is that I can put this pen in this slot, then I can do a pass normal with this pen, and now I can move this finger out, and we are in the correct end position. This is the left-handed or levo chirality. And yeah, you can only do this if the fingers bend the other direction. Hi, it's RPD from the future with more explanations. I had noticed for that 2-pen-1 hand trick that it could only be done in one direction, but then I realized that what we call the same trick in 1-pen-1 hand leads to mechanical inconsistencies, and then when we try to apply this definition in 2-pen-1 hand is when we start getting trouble. The issue is that we are unifying the upwards and downwards variations of a trick with the same rotation direction. In 1-pen-1 hand, we can usually do this, but this leads to cases in which the unified tricks are mechanically different. So for example, for a sonic, the upward sonic is this, all fingers are straight, but the downward sonic, in the same rotation direction, the 2 finger is bent completely. Same for a twisted sonic, upwards twisted sonic, all fingers are straight. On a downwards twisted sonic, on the same rotation direction, all fingers are bent. Same for a pass, upwards pass is on the back side of the hand, downwards pass is on the palm side of the hand, and also one of the fingers bends. If the tricks were unified mechanically, then this wouldn't have happened, but then we would have mixed tricks with different rotation directions. So let us consider the mechanically similar upwards and downwards variations of a trick to be the same trick, and let us ignore rotation direction. Then for a sonic, the upwards and the downwards are mechanically similar. The twisted sonic, upwards and downwards, are also mechanically similar. And then for a pass, it's also the same. Now, I want to consider all reflection modifiers and see what they do to a trick. For the reverse, which is just time reversal, for non-aerial tricks, it always exists, but it can change the trick mechanics. So for example, this trick, thumb around into index around, it becomes index around into thumb around. The moonwalk of any trick always exists, given that we allow for wrist rotations. This is because we need to compensate for gravity, which is always downward, so as long as we can turn our hand upside down, it's fine. We will have this symmetry in the system of our hand and pen. For the inverse of any trick that doesn't require significant bending of the fingers, it will always exist. Otherwise, it depends. This is because fingers can bend more to this side than to this side. And then for antipodals is when it gets interesting. The reason is that this symmetry doesn't exist at all in the hand. So like the fingers bend this way, but do not bend in the other way, right? So antipodals usually require fingers getting out of the way. And in 1-pen-1 hand, we can compensate this by considering mechanically different tricks to be the antipodal of the trick, as long as the overall rotation direction and slot match what we would expect. So for example, antipodal sonic is a trick that we expect has this rotation and starts and ends in the same slot, so like from 2-3 to 1-2. So we consider this trick to be the antipodal sonic, so moonwalk sonic reverse. But you see that this is not the same trick. This is a slightly different trick mechanically. We had to bend two very significantly. Then, in two pen one hand, antipodal works more or less the same with some caveats. So for example, antipodal tangle can be done as long as we consider a slightly different trick mechanically with the slots and rotation direction that would correspond to antipodal tangle to be the trick. So this would include also chirality, etc. And this is the same case as what we saw before with the sonic. We just considered two tricks that are slightly different to be the antipodal versions of each other. For the two pen one hand trick that I showed at the start of the video, there is no way to find this slightly different trick mechanically that fits this criteria. So there is no way for the fingers to get out of the way, and thus this trick cannot be done, it doesn't exist.